Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. You guys have been asking for this one since it came out. The latest epic rap battle of history. This is Henry Ford versus Karl Marx. I have done most of their epic rap battles of history over time. This one will be in the playlist with those. I'll put a list down in the description with some of the links to some of the other ones if you want to check those out. As I typically do with these, it's only a 3-minute video, so I will probably stop frequently to break it down and try to analyze what's being said and talk about the historic context behind it. I'll confess up front, I know some about the story of Henry Ford. I know less about Karl Marx, but I think there'll probably be enough in here that I'll be able to pick up on some things. So anything I miss, anything I don't mention, use the comment section below and mention it. So that way we can read through the comments and we can all learn. Every single line I know in these epic rap battles of history means something. So I'm definitely going to miss some of the references. If you want to see the original and watch it before I break it down, I'll put the link down in the description. You can check it out as well as all of their other great content. Let's go ahead and dive in to this one. So let's talk real quick before we even get into it, right? Who's Henry Ford? Henry Ford's the founder of Ford Motor Company. He did not invent the automobile. The automobile was invented most likely. I mean, like most inventions, no invention's really just the work of one person, right? Everybody is building on the research, the discoveries, the knowledge of others. And then they take it and they make it better, or they add to it, or they perfect it, or they make a breakthrough the other person couldn't make. Most of the major inventions of history have been collaborative efforts by multiple people over time. What does Henry Ford do? He perfects the production of the automobile. He streamlines it. He makes the automobile, rather than being something only for the wealthy, he makes it accessible to the common man. And that's why he's remembered. The assembly line, which again, he did not invent the assembly line, but he uses it to make automobiles, make them cheaper, make them easier to produce, more affordable for people. Karl Marx is one of the early thinkers and proponents of the idea of socialism, right? Or on the extreme end, communism. He's German, he's Prussian. He's born in Prussia, ends up dying in London. Stateless. He doesn't have a nationality at that point because really nobody wants him because of the ideas that he's espousing. Famous for writing things like Das Kapital, which he never actually finished, I don't think. So, yeah, let's see what they have to say.
Mr. Motor City needs some medicine red. My lines are a production. Your lines are red.
So Motor City is Detroit because a lot of the automobile companies go to Detroit right off the bat, and bread lines, you know, this is the idea that socialism really is only about the government controlling everything, which means that nobody's going to have anything. And it's, you know, the argument against it is that everybody ends up completely dependent on the government. And so bread lines develop, right? People waiting for basic necessities from the government.
Disassembling timepieces is how I got my start now. Watch me tear your ideology apart. You scream, unite the workers, free the class slaves. Lose your change, trade them in for mass graves. Mao and Stalin, wow, appalling amounts of body bag. When a world leader likes you, that's a red flag.
So he mentions Mao from China and Stalin from the Soviet Union as two examples of leaders who espoused what Karl Marx was all about. And he's pointing to the worst case scenarios, and he's saying, look at how many people died because of this ideology. Whereas, I mean, you can look at examples of places where it didn't happen, but more often than not, when extreme socialism has been tried, it has ended up with that kind of a situation.
I produce with my two hands. You're a destitute tramp, scheming to trade bootstraps in for food stamps. Any person tried to seize my private property will catch a torn press to his private parts properly. Who takes advice from a broke slob? It's laughable. I wouldn't wipe my tailpipe with your Das Kapital.
Das Kapital. So Das Kapital is his work that he never actually finished, but it's what he's known for. Yeah, Karl Marx did die basically broke, but his children ended up quite wealthy because Friedrich Engels, who was a friend and basically a colleague and a close friend of Karl Marx, actually leaves a lot of money to Marx's children.
You'd save the penny for his daughter you named Jenny. You might not have needed to bury quite so many. Who's that?
Ouch. So, yeah, Karl Marx's wife, her name was Jenny. And I believe all of their daughters had the first name Jenny, but then had different middle names. I think only one of the Jennys died young, though. I think all the other ones actually survived. But this was not all that uncommon, especially for German families. If you go back not too far before Karl Marx's time, you'll see that a lot of German immigrants to the United States, for example, every one of their sons had the first name Johann, John. It would be Johann and then some middle name that was different. So you'd have Johann Peter and Johann Michael and Johann Paul. And most of the daughters would be named Mary, Maria Teresa, Maria Margareta, Maria Charlotte, whatever it might be. It was a common thing that they did at the time. So him naming all his daughters with the first name Jenny, I guess, wasn't that unusual, nor was having children die young, which Karl Marx and his wife Jenny, like a lot of families in the 19th century, had some children that died young.
It's Karl Marx. Prepare to be Reichstag. I'm dropping you like Hitler dropped your name in Mein Kampf.
Oh, Hitler did mention Henry Ford in Mein Kampf. So Henry Ford seems to have definitely been anti-Semitic. In fact, a publication he owned actually was very outspoken against Jews in the 1920s. And of course, this endeared him to this up-and-coming leader of the National Socialist Party in Germany, which by the time Hitler takes over and the direction he takes it, please don't assume because it had the name socialist in it that that's what they were. They were definitely right-wing. They get away from the socialism aspect of their party by the time Hitler comes to power in the 1930s. But yeah, and there's some indications that Henry Ford's company, even while he was still alive, was maybe even collaborating with the Nazis. And I think like in the late 1930s, Henry Ford got some award from the Nazi party in Germany, which he accepted. And by this point, everybody knew what Hitler was. I mean, it wasn't like it was early on or anything like that. So there's some definite questions about Ford's ties to Germany and anti-Semitism for sure.
Codes of didn't cause mass grave. We did get that from books, but you didn't read shit. Your self-made man studies them from a tortoise. Your daddy's the ones gave you a free fall.
So going back to what he said there, he said it wasn't socialism directly that led to those bodies. It was greed, and that's true. And I'll say this about socialism: on paper, it's a great idea. The problem is, anything on paper is great until people get involved. And that's not just socialism, that's capitalism too, right? Human nature is human nature, and human nature is, more often than not, especially when you're dealing with powerful people at the top, greed. And greed is what makes socialism not work, because unfortunately, for it to work properly, it would require people not to be greedy, and I don't think they're capable of that, unfortunately.
You were the first of 6 kids till the 7th killed your mother. Maybe that's why you spied on your workers like Big Brother. Your Model T, total lack of style is killing me.
Lack of style. So the nature of making these vehicles on an assembly line meant that they were all the same, right? They were cookie cutter type things. So what made them inexpensive was your ability to pump out a bunch of them, because they all had the same parts, and so each person on the assembly line had their job to put their piece in. It made it go quickly, but it also meant it was easy to make spare parts and make repairs, because you could just swap out that part for the other part. And so, yeah, there is a lack of style to it, but by its nature, that's what makes it accessible to people and inexpensive.
Getting shit from you according to ability. Do what your first car can.
So from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, and so he's making a reference to that.
And back up, beating is like your city in Brazil. Nuts!
Don't step that close without some beer shampoo, son. You lived in Cologne. Look like you could've used some. I drip a style like a dipstick drips oil. You look as sick as your chronic dick boil.
don't know if I've ever read whether or not Karl Marx had any kind of sexually transmitted disease, but I know he had some kind of a skin ailment that meant that he did form boils on his body. So I don't know if that was unique to that. Maybe somebody can let me know in the comment section below, but I remember reading something about him having some kind of chronic skin ailment that would cause boils on his skin.
Views on a utopian hobo. I'm throwing you for loops like the F of my logo. Our caveman work, you brought nothing but harm. Take your bourgeois pig shit back to Animal Farm.
So Animal Farm was a book that was written back in the day that kind of exposed a lot of things that people weren't already aware of before that.
Dishes were bleak, crabbing machines, cranking out 4 severed fingers a week. You controlled what employees could think, drink, and eat. And when they marched for better wages, shot them dead in the street. In truth,
this was something that happened a lot at the time when Henry Ford and a lot of these other big business guys were coming to power, was that when workers did start to try and organize unions, and when they would go on strike, and when they would try to fight for better wages and better conditions and things like that, very often then to break the strike, the military would be brought in, or the Pinkerton agency would be brought in, and you'd end up with situations where people ended up dead. It happened in Pittsburgh with the steel mills, and I don't know of the situation that he's referring to here with Henry Ford, but it obviously must have happened with them as well.
what you produced were alienated working men who would clock into Detroit and lose themselves like Eminem. And now your Great Lakes State ain't exactly a great sight. You were west of Michigan and Flint's water pipes.
So he's basically making a reference to the fact that Detroit, which was once this great city that was huge and doing well, is, if you look at it today, really has kind of fallen a long way. And like a lot of cities in the part of the country where I live, were known as the Rust Belt for a reason. Cities like Youngstown, which is, I live just outside of Youngstown, had all these steel mills, and the work moved elsewhere. A lot of it moved overseas. A lot of auto production has moved to the south or moved overseas. Even Canada and Mexico and places like that. And so a lot of those jobs disappeared from places like Detroit and Youngstown. And so those factories now sit there and rusting and falling apart. And so that's why they call it the Rust Belt. That's absolutely true. I mean, where I live, real close to the city of Youngstown, in 1930, Youngstown, Ohio was larger than Nashville, Tennessee. Youngstown had like 130,000 people. It has less than half of that now, 100 years later. So Detroit's a lot the same way.
You gripes about oppression, don't leave me impressed. You're not hot, Karl, that's just shit on your chest. For a man who's stateless, you got an awful lot to say.
Stateless,
I pay
yep.
you $5 a day to go away. Buddy ain't.
So yeah, Henry Ford actually kind of standardized not only the production of the automobile, but also what he paid workers. And it was a set rate, and there were, the 8-hour workday and all those sorts of things kind of come in. Frederick Engels,
yeah. Textile bill. I guess the capitalists are cool when they're paying your bills. You're a hypocrite, a nitwit who's love with substance issues. Step off your soapbox, take the soap with you.
I will say this in defense of Karl Marx. I don't necessarily see it as a act of hypocrisy for the fact that Friedrich Engels was using a capitalist system to fund what he was doing. Because when you're working for change, and I'm not saying that I agree with Karl Marx, but you're working for some kind of change, sometimes you have to operate within the system as it exists in order to get the system you want. So you taking advantage of capitalism in order to promote a different system, it's not a huge deal to me that he would do that.
Dummy, shedding money is the communist vision. Engels' bank was the crank that got the revolution spinning. We did everything to see the common people advance. I'm so down with the cause, I even pawned my own pants. You grew so out of touch, you sabotaged your only kid. It's a stomach cancer, showed more love than you did.
Oh, so he talks about Edsel Ford, who is Henry Ford's only child, and took over the company and didn't necessarily do it real well. It was kind of a disaster, especially this car they came out with called the Edsel. And Edsel Ford did die in his late 40s from stomach cancer. I think he died before his father did. And Edsel is the one who maybe had some real close ties with Germany, with their Ford plants over in Germany that kind of supported the Nazi regime.
Your legacy's in ashes, remembered as the fascist sympathizing cause of climate change and car crashes. From your newspaper to your Nazi factory, cross the board. Frankly, Hank, it's clear as which side you are on. This battle's been applauded like that hemorrhage in your head. I leave a Ford as expected, found on road dead.
Ooh, who won? I think I got to go with Karl Marx on this one. I think he's probably the underdog going in, but I feel like his digs on Ford were a little better. A lot of Fords on Karl Marx were more low-hanging fruit. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and let's talk about some of the other references that I didn't pause and talk about. Let's learn. Let's use this entertainment as a way of learning more about these two very consequential figures in history. Use the comment section below. Check out some of the other epic rap battles I've broken down over time. I put those links in there as well, and I'll throw up a couple here at the end. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.